Looming over everything right now is the Ukrainian counteroffensive. When's it going to start? What will it entail? Where will it be? And this week, we got a little insight into some of that. This whole messaging about a major attack is pretty interesting. On the one hand, a military force would want that to be entirely secret, only allowing for intentional leaks that foster some sort of deception plan to throw the enemy off. But there's also the domestic and international audience that has to be considered. So while Ukraine is seeking continued international support, there's a need to message to external audiences that this thing is in the works and is coming soon. Pretty sure that's what we're seeing here. This current wave of talking about the operation started on May 28th when General Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, released a short hype video, for lack of a better term. It's about a minute long, and a link to the full video, if interested, is in the description below. Then a day later, during his evening address, Ukrainian President Zelensky stated, quote, "We have approved the dates for the start of the movement of our troops. The decisions have been made. I thank the brigades that prepared for this," end quote. Quick note on that front. I think it's easy to assume that a date was blocked off in the calendar months ahead of time, but there's likely a window of time they plan to kick this thing off based off of the current situation. That could depend on how shaping operations and the strikes are playing out, the expected impact those are having against Russian forces, incorporating in any delays of moving men and equipment to those forward positions, and of course, weather. I wouldn't take Zelensky's comments to mean that the troops are currently moving to contact, but more that they've begun necessary movement to staging locations in preparation for the attack. And of course, there's a ton of variables at play here, but that's generally not something you issue months ahead of time, which means we could see this thing kick off in the coming days or weeks. And the last piece here was from U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham after he returned from a visit to Ukraine. In an interview with NatSec Daily, he said that after reviewing a briefing on the plans of the operation, the Russians are in for a rude awakening, adding, quote, "In the coming days, you're going to see a pretty impressive display of power by the Ukrainians," end quote. I've said before that my personal opinion is that this is going to be a lot bigger than most people think, to the scale of the largest land battle in Europe since World War II. And while I don't believe the war can be won by either side in the next 6 months, this is Ukraine's best chance to inflict a serious loss on the Russian military. They've been able to build up and equip multiple brigades that have been withheld from the fighting for just this purpose. So there's no reason to hold them back now in preparation for the next thing. This is the next thing, and I think Ukraine's going to go all in. That said, it's best to view this anticipated attack as just the next phase in this war, a war that we still have no idea how long it could last. So while there certainly will be a lot of early chatter wanting to portray every single move as either a sign of failure or success, we have to be patient and recognize how this will fit into the broader context of the overall conflict. How will it set up conditions for the fall and into the winter? How will each side go about reconstituting their forces, and how is it perceived by friendly nations of the two sides? But overall, be on the lookout. It's starting to look like this could kick off at any point. Shifting over to a topic that has been at the top of the news this week, drones. This past week saw a pretty significant uptick in the drone war. Now, at the line of contact, this has been nonstop for months, with as many as 50 UAVs airborne at any given time over each 10-kilometer stretch of the front. But the deeper strikes further into each side's territory is what really picked up here. Starting with Russian strikes, the period of time from May 20th to May 38th saw one of the largest barrages since the war began. On the 28th, according to Ukrainian sources, 54 Shahed-style drones were launched. Then on the 29th, there were 35 drones, 40 Kh-101 or Kh-555 missiles, and 10 Iskanders. And then finally, on the 30th, 31 more drones. So that's 120 drones and 50 missiles in a 72-hour period. Now, in terms of the battle damage assessment, that's getting more and more convoluted as the war goes on. Ukraine here claims to have shot down 110 of the drones and 47 of the missiles, and it's clear that some impacted, which Ukraine didn't deny, but it's hard to tell exactly what Russia was targeting here. On the Russian side, President Putin said that they were carrying out strikes against decision-making centers in Kyiv, and Shoigu added, quote, "During the past few days, large warehouses of Western weapons were destroyed in Kaminsky, Ternopil, and Mykolaiv. The Patriot missile system in Kyiv was also hit." In terms of the Patriot being hit, it's kind of the same as last time. There's not really anything to base it off of other than this one statement. And while some did take that as proof, a certain Russian group laughed it off and mocked the Ministry of Defense. Rusich is a pretty far-right paramilitary group full of Russian nationalists with neo-Nazi ties, and they weren't exactly on board with Shoigu's statement there. So to their Telegram channel on the 30th, they posted, quote, "I also admit, but I didn't see any evidence, that one Patriot missile defense system was destroyed last time, but I don't understand why this is given such a focus of attention. It's expendable." Adding, quote, There's also no objective control data from our side. Shoigu and his Department of Degenerates could not even name and publish what they were aimed at, what kind of decision-making centers. Because if you publish the coordinates, then satellite images will appear, proving that Shoigu is a liar. We'll go with liar. It's a little more colorful. They can say absolutely any nonsense with a serious face, while in the statements of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, there is about 5 to 15% truthful information. I'm not exaggerating, end quote. So when you see the claims of a destroyed Patriot system or anything else, and you ask, where's the proof, like photos, videos, satellite imagery, anything else, you're not alone. There's people inside of Russia asking those same questions. Also on May 30th, a small swarm of drones appeared over Moscow. Now, Russia says that 5 were shot down and 3 were jammed, forcing them to crash, and there does appear to be just some minor damage overall, which very well could be from falling debris. Now, the numbers are a little bit vague here. Some early reports had it as high as 32 drones over Moscow, but I think there was some mixed counting there. 8 on or about seems to be the number most people are going with. The fixed-wing drones shown in the videos look pretty similar to a Canard model, and thanks to Trent Talenko on Twitter, who ran through pretty solid analysis here. He showed that those are publicly available for purchase on Alibaba at $42,000 each and have a range of 525 kilometers, which is more than enough to reach Moscow from Ukrainian territory. As expected, Russia blamed Ukraine. Ukraine said they had nothing to do with it. And the United States came out saying that they do not support attacks inside of Russia. Also, as expected, a handful of folks were calling this an obvious false flag, that Russia staged this attack to garner domestic support for an escalation or additional mobilization or anything else. I mean, big picture, Russia doesn't need a false flag. Throughout this war, they've mobilized, escalated, and shifted targets really whenever they want to. I just don't think a false flag is very realistic here. In fact, from my perspective, all signs point to Ukraine. For starters, Ukrainian Chief of Intelligence Budanov, the day before this attack, said, quote, "Our response will not be long in coming. Everyone will see everything soon," end quote. While Russian media largely wrote this attack off as massive but meaningless, there is some value here for Ukraine. Even though there weren't warheads attached to these drones, which makes sense given the added weight would limit the range to where these drones probably couldn't reach Moscow, it shows that Ukraine has the ability to bring the war home to Russian citizens. The fact that they made it there at all is a significant message. Additionally, this raises even more doubts about the vaunted Russian air defense around Moscow. I mean, this is supposed to be one of the most heavily protected areas in terms of air defense around the entire world. But now Ukraine has breached it twice with pretty inexpensive drones. So maybe it's not all that buttoned up after all. That gives reason for people in Russia to question what's going on with this war and why Moscow isn't protected from the fighting. That is of value to Ukraine. It's easier to support a war if you don't feel its effects, but when drones start appearing overhead, that could change some perceptions. Last aspect here, I've heard a lot of speculation that this could be a partisan group operating from inside of Russia. I doubt it. I mean, it takes a lot of intel and coordination to find seams in Russian air defense like was done here. That's a level of sophistication we just haven't seen in other partisan attacks. These groups are also pretty quick to announce anything they've done, which makes sense. They're trying to gather support for their cause, not leave speculation that it was an entirely different actor. So between the 3 responsible parties, this looks like it was most likely carried out by Ukraine, and understandably so. I mean, if my home was being attacked every night, I'd be chomping at the bit to strike back in any way possible. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.